Girl with the dragon tattoo. The original title of this book in Swedish means men who hate women. And that's really important because it really connects to the whole general idea of the books. I think they made the story, The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, they kind of like focus on Elizabeth, even though she's not really the main lead. Well, she's the main character, but even though it's not really about her. I like to state from the beginning, right now, this book is not for everyone. I don't mean that because I think it lacks anything, but because of the subject matter. It tackles issues of rape, incest, murder, corruption, journalistic integrity, and even mental illness to a degree. The main male character is Michael Blomkvist. I know I'm pronouncing that wrong, so I apologize right now. He's one of our two leads, and he is almost painfully human, you know. He's a cheater, somewhat of a player, you know, neglectful father, snarky, and kind of naive. And while his story isn't as interesting as Lisbeth's, he's the closest to a normal human being, and therefore we relate to him. And as you read the book, he's obviously kind of like a writer's stand-in. You know, he gets all the girls, he's like a hottie, and he's this great journalist and everything like that. Yet, despite the fact that he's an obvious writer stand-in, he works because he's human. He has all the flaws that a normal man would have. And it shows that when you have a stand-in character, the point is not for the stand-in character to be like the absolute best at everything. Michael has flaws. Michael is a very flawed character. He's not perfect in any way, shape, or form. And he knows this. And people call him out on these things. He is not special. He's just good at what he does. And that's why I liked Michael. He was human while still being interesting. And you can feel for him no matter what happens. Because whether you agree with him or not, you understand why he does what he does. And then the star of this book, in the sense of the two protagonists, is Elizabeth. You know, she's a rape survivor, a misandrist, she's violent, brave, smart, and completely and utterly disturbed. You know, a lot of the exposition in this book dives into her history, and after hearing her history as a reader, you understand every single action she takes in the book, whether you agree with it or not, because let's face it, there are certain things that she says in this book that I do not agree with at all, but at the same time I can be like, well, I don't agree with her, I think she's wrong, but I totally understand, based on her history, why she would think that way. And I love that, because I love the fact that even when I don't like what she does, there is logic behind it, and there's a reason where I can be like, okay, I understand her. I understand her, which is something very rare that happens nowadays. And I would love to see all the angst-ridden protagonists in young adult novels deal with the shit that she's had to deal with in this book. In terms of the book itself, there was this article written by Laurie Penny, which says, Larson, the writer, who died of a heart attack just before the trilogy was published, was disgusted by sexual violence, having witnessed the gang rape of a girl when he was 15. According to a friend of his, the author never forgave himself for failing to help the girl, whose name was Lisbeth, like the young heroine of the trilogy, who was also a rape survivor. And that statement really explains why the disturbing content in the book exists. It isn't just made for, like, shock value or to just be, like, surprise for the audience. It is meant to inform. Each, you know, new part of the book has a small statistic about, you know, abused women in the bottom in Sweden. And it's clear that this book was written with a deeper purpose, that it's not for shock value. It's not just to, like, be like, oh my god, I can't believe this is happening. It is to tell the truth. It is to be as gory as possible so that you get the message that this is wrong, this is perverse, this is twisted. And I love that about that. I love that it goes to that level, it goes to that point, and it does it for a reason, not just to be, you know, oh, we're just deep. Continuous praise of this book would be easy, but there are problems with this book as with any other. It has a lot of exposition and backstory in awkward places. Like, when all the information happens together, it kind of breaks in between the story, because you get, like, Michael's story, Lisbeth's backstory, and then some more of her, then you'll have some of Michael and some of Lisbeth. And while all the information was fantastic, and it allowed me to really understand the characters' personalities, Lisbeth's backstory, and just her story in general, took me out of the main story, which is supposed to be about Michael finding about Harriet. And there were times I would have to reread sections to remember, what exactly was going on with Michael, because for so long we had a gap between his story and her story that for that whole time I just was like, I don't really remember what happened, because I'm so wrapped up in what happened with Harriet, what was happening with Lisbeth, that when it's time to talk about Michael, I'm like, oh yeah, gotta go remember what happened to Michael. And there's a lot of exposition, and that whole character structure is weird. And if you aren't open to the idea of having really flawed characters, you really won't like this book. If you really need a perfect protagonist, and some people do, this is not for you. There is no perfect, idealistic human beings in this story at all. As for the mystery itself of finding Harriet, I'm sure there are plenty of people who figured out certain things early on, but I don't think that should or will deter yourself from reading the book. But however, just putting that out there. I've already mentioned disturbing content, so if you can't handle the content I mentioned before, or have a weak tolerance towards it, this is not for you. I don't mean this as an insult or anything. I mean, if I didn't have the kind of, strength that I have about watching horror and reading these kind of terrible things, I'd be disturbed too. All in all, this book has really lived up to the hype and has introduced me to a whole new genre, which is really good because my mother loves crime novels, but I never really got into it. Now we have something else to bond over, which is really great. So final grade for this book is an A+, like indefinitely. I love this book deeply, and I'm glad I got The Girl Who Played with Fire already, so I can just dive into it when I'm done reading other stuff that I have to do. And I've already spoken about its good qualities above, however, but I want to add something else. In this book, he has 3 important female characters who have been abused, and they all deal with it differently. I'm glad he put it in there, because the fact of the matter is that not all women are like Lisbeth. Lisbeth, she deals with her rape like a strong person. The other 2 women help to show that the other side of a victim's mentality. Because a lot of times we just wondered, like, why can't they just do this and get up? And Elizabeth, she's the kind of heroine that, when we watch Lifetime movies or whatever, she just, she deals with the problem, the thing happens to her, she deals with it, and she moves on. Almost kind of mechanically. With the other 2 women in the story, they really deal with it in their own separate ways. And you may not even agree, they might be seen as weaker, but in my opinion, it shows that people deal with grief and rape and these kind of torturous ordeals in their own way. And that to me is one of the most important things about this book, that's showing that women and how they handle being victimized is completely different, and you cannot generalize it, because when you do that, you make it seem as though one type of woman is just fundamentally weaker than the other, and it's not true. You can be the strongest woman in the world on a regular basis, but if you get raped, it can totally destroy you, and I love the fact that he did that. Thank you guys for watching, and I really, really hope you check out The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. It is fantastic.